some faces and names and familiar, but just go around the teams and just do a quick intro, just name and maybe your role and what utility you're with. Just start to continue to get to know each other. I'll just say it's for my benefit. I'm learning, and so I want to get to know folks a little better. But yeah, just welcome everybody, and yeah, just as a transition, it was 80 degrees here in Kansas City on Thursday, and it's like in the 30s today. So this project is about change. Change can happen quickly, slowly, whatever. So that's my best shot at a transition. Talking about the weather to getting into our change initiatives here as it relates to business case evaluations and project delivery. So yeah, just real quick, let's go around the teams and just make quick introduction again. Name, role, where you're calling in from, or who you work for. Again, my name's Dan Ott. I'm the project management section head, and I'm with KC Water. And we've got a couple other folks with KC Water that have jumped on. So I'll just let them introduce themselves, and then we'll get around. So maybe Zach, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Zach Monroe. I'm under Dan as the project scheduler here at KC Water, and yeah.
And when he says under, that means he's like lifting me up, trying to keep me from falling down. So, right. All right. Thanks, Zach. How about Scott Parker?
Hello, everyone. I think most of you know me. I'm the asset manager here at KC Water. I'm also lifting Dan up, but I passed that off to Zach because he's pretty heavy. If you haven't met Dan, so.
Plus, Scott broke his arm, so he's not lifting heavy objects these days. So he's on the road to recovery. So thanks, Scott. All right, how about we go to Getachew?
Hi, good morning. This is Getachew from DC Water. I lead the BCI improvement project here at DC Water. Thank you.
And Getachew and I are tag teaming on facilitating this group. So, in other words, I do a lot of talking. He really does all the work. So, all right. How about Jeff?
Hey, Jeff Carmichael, Metro Vancouver. I work in business development within liquid waste and solid waste. So a lot of that has to do with opportunities to make money and innovate. So often those revolve around actually surprisingly climate change, but not always.
Awesome. And Jeff's going to share his case study with us later, I hope. All right. How about Zanetta?
Good morning. I'm Zonetta English with Louisville and Jefferson County Metropolitan Sewer District. I'm the Strategic Initiatives and Project Delivery Director.
All right.
Good to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks, Zanetta. How about Steve?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Tolsman. I'm with the other KC, King County Wastewater Treatment Division in Seattle, Washington, and I work in capital project planning.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. How about Jenny?
Good morning, Jenny Chaddick with Tacoma Water, and I'm a process analyst in our system and asset planning group.
Okay, awesome. And Jessica?
Hey, I'm Jessica Dazar, Loudon Water, Asset Management Program Director.
Excellent. Thanks, Jessica. And Kathleen?
Hi, I'm Kathleen Carker. I'm with DC Water. I work with Getachew. Actually transitioned out of CIP planning into a new department we call infrastructure management, which is really liaison between finance and engineering.
Right, awesome. And Kathleen really led the charge with the BCE development in the year one effort. So yeah, thanks, Kathleen. And how about, let's see, I think we've got Scott.
Scott Haskins from Seattle, starting to get light here. And I'm a co-principal investigator supporting the project in UAL.
All right, awesome. And last but not least, Cello. And Cello, with that, first thing on our agenda were just any updates from you or Scott on the overall UAIM that you might want to share with the group.
Just quickly, Jonathan Schlaudraff, did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah, sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Jump in there, Jonathan.
Yeah, no worries. Jonathan Schwadroff here with Tacoma Water. I'm a quantitative analyst on the asset management team.
Awesome. Yeah, but before Chella's talks, it's great just to do the refresher on the introductions. Again, I think we're starting to get familiar with names and faces, and it's cool because we've got a diverse group from really all over the country, coast to coast, and also diverse roles within the organization. So very cool. Chella, go ahead.
I'm Chella Vitasevich. I'm the principal investigator on this, and I like to say that I'm in charge of special effects and distractions on the project. And I just like to hang out with all the brilliant people on this project. So what we have going on right now is basically 6 efforts going on in parallel. This one, a similar one on asset management and on risk, and then we have the three people topics: change management, workforce, and organizational culture. And so there's a lot of activity, and there are leads like Dan and Getachew and Zonetta on these different initiatives. And we're planning workshops, and there will be remote, and trying to put together a program for that. And I also am trying to put together, because we have so many people who are new, and also so many people that are kind of have been focused on one thing. I'm trying to put together a little document that would kind of show the whole elephant rather than, overall vision of what we're trying to do. And it'll be 2 things. It'll be a paper that will be published by the Water Environment Federation and International Waters. And there'll be a little video that I'm going to send a draft to everybody and have them review, so that we can all sort of be on the same page. So a lot of activity, a lot of good things happening, and it's all led by utility partners like Dan and Getachew and Zonetta and others. So that's so much for me.
Chella, when did you need comments on that? I know I owe you comments on the paper. I've got it on my schedule, but.
Well, I know you got a lot of things going on. When you get a chance, it'd be great to have that. And I hope that this video, I worked on it last weekend, will help also provide the context, because I know that it's a little bit heavy load, all the work connected to this project. So I'm trying to make it as easy for people as possible. And I know that reading another thing from Cello is a bit of a burden. So whenever you get a chance.
All right, very good. Thanks, Cello. Scott, any other additions from your end?
No, I think we should get into it, Dan.
Okay, fantastic. Well, yeah, I just wanted to do a little bit of warm up, being a Monday morning, so everybody's got their coffee ready to go. And just as a reminder, the focus of this one's kind of neat, because each of us are tackling our own improvement initiative around business case evaluations or project delivery, and everybody's in a different place. And I think it's neat because everybody can be working, I guess, independently. So I think what's worked pretty well, at least I'll say I've really benefited from having these times, at least right now within the project, now that we're 2 or 3 sessions in, meetings is using this time to share kind of where we're at. And again, if you're having challenges, what challenges you might be having. And I would say with that, some folks are going to be further along than others. So we want to hear from everybody or anybody. So don't be afraid to speak up. So with that, I wanted to open it up to the group to just share, where you're at, any progress that you made that we can talk about, that we can celebrate, we can listen in on, and then talk through some challenges. And then, like I said, Jeff's going to share, do some sharing with a case study of where they're at in a little more depth to like I say, generate some thoughts and ideas. So with that, I'll just kind of kick it off with the first question. Any new improvement initiatives that folks have identified or would like to share since the last meeting? And this is the hard part. All right, Jessica's going to jump in. Good deal.
So I'm obviously new to this group, and I've been at Loud and Water for 2 years, and we're just getting started with the whole business case concept, I guess you could say. I mean, we've had business cases by consultants in the past, but we're trying to put together a more formal process that we're using internally to really think through the projects that we need to do a little bit better. So we've had a CIP process for years, I guess, that's been followed, and there's a basic form that's filled out when new projects need to be implemented, but the information's always been pretty basic, and we're a younger utility and we don't have a whole lot of asset failure, so to say. So money hasn't really been an issue in the past. So it's sort of like, if you need a project, sure, go ahead. You don't necessarily think through it as much. So we've started putting together a business case type process recently, which I think is going really well. And we're calling it more of a project information form. So kind of more basic information where you put in some details about what you're trying to accomplish, and it goes through our asset management team to pull any asset data to support that, and then bringing it to a committee to discuss the projects before it goes to an official CIP project, just to think through it more. And I think this is, it's still a work in progress for us, but I think we've made a lot of progress, and we're feeling pretty good about just the amount of information that we have to support the projects moving forward, and whether or not we need to go through a full business case with a consultant or not. But kind of what I would love to hear from the group is, as we've been going through these test cases, I think the vision, and we're still kind of like piloting it right now, but the vision was sort of that we'd have different projects come to this committee, and the committee would review all of their projects and kind of make recommendations on the path forward. But I'm finding that, each project can take a full hour to get through the review committee. And is that even feasible in the long run to spend that much time on every single project when we really start to get into good discussions? But I would kind of love to hear if there's others that are following a similar process, and is it taking you an hour to get through projects, or are we, we're still learning, but seems
right.
like a lot.
Yeah. No, excellent. That's great, and I'm not surprised. Scott Parker from our organization raised his hand. We're doing something similar. So go ahead, Scott.
Jessica,
Yes.
Great question. Great question. I have had the opportunity, I guess, in my career to work for a couple of different agencies, two of which sound very much like your organization, where you have adequate resources, or seemingly adequate resources, to address your particular business need or your more immediate need. I think Jeff and I put together a little document around whenever that was in February, like basically it's the discernment process of when you think a business case is needed. I'll tell you that my opinion on that is, and we're actually following this at KC Water right now. We don't think every project needs a full-blown business case evaluation. And the reason is because of the very thing that you're mentioning. You can bog yourself down in the process so deeply that you actually miss some of the projects that probably do need that hour discussion, because you got 25 projects or whatever that you got to get to. So we actually have, on the front end of our BCE process, or of our CIP planning process, we have a group. It's our ultimate decision committee. I don't remember what I call them in the documents, but I can share those with you, no problem. Well, we literally go in and say, okay, which one of these projects do we think really needs a business case evaluation? And because we know that when we do that, that means those projects are going to get a lot more attention. The other thing I'll mention is, I think another thing that's kind of important, I mentioned this on one call, I can't remember when it was, but I've seen business cases that are hundreds of pages long, right? And quite frankly, they have no effect because nobody, even I, who've been in charge of the business cases, don't even read them, if that tells you something, right? So what we use that process for, probably more than anything else, is to get a good conversation going based on those projects that we think that need to have that conversation. We use some level of objective criteria to determine that, but really the crux of the matter, quite frankly, is do we have enough evidence and have we considered enough alternatives? However that's achieved, you can use a rubric, you can use a open discussion, whatever you want to do, and then so that if we're called to the carpet for why we picked that project, we have that at our disposal. But I know some organizations do a lot more detail than that, but for us, and really the amount of staff that we have, and really in all the organizations I've worked with, it's the same thing. You want that process to enlighten the choices that you make and maybe justify the choices that you make, but I don't think you want them to control the process. And that business case process can control the whole CIP planning process if you're not careful. That's my take.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Jenny? Oh, I'm sorry.
Looks like Kathleen's got her hand up. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Did Jenny want to say something? No. Okay. So, of course, as usual, Scott's spot on. My question may be back to KC Water. If the spending an hour talking about the project, I think is quite critical for projects that need it. So you don't want to make it too fast tracked, but I think what Scott was saying is you don't need to go into that detail for all of the projects. So I kind of open it up to people about what criteria you do use. We dusted off our business case guidance that was H2M Hill had written for us, and they had, I think, $500,000 was the first decision point. Anything less than $500,000, you don't do a business case for. I think Toho Water has $1 million in their guidance. I'm not sure money is the exact thing. What did you say, Scott? You said, do you have enough evidence alternatives to make a good choice? But can people share what kind of objective criteria they use?
Just to answer the question, and I'll be brief here. We don't use dollars. What we use is we kind of use, I would call the judgment of our committee to help us, because to be quite frank, we have some $500,000 projects that are so tricky on the political side or otherwise that they need to have that level of analysis, where we have some, we may have a $5 million replacement project that's just a replacement project, right? It's a simple one-to-one. There's no real decision point. So that's sort of what how we're doing it.
We don't use the $500,000 trigger either. We run through about 40, say 50 different projects over 3 hours, and we just apply the filter of, are there significant options available that could lead to either a cost saving or some other environmental benefit that hasn't been considered. And it's just a discussion with, say, 10, 15 people around the table. We'll often flag 3 to 5 that need that, and then we send them sideways for an options analysis. That's the filter, and that can be down to $100,000 or a $50,000 project. So we're not trying to, most of them though, sail right through. Not a great option available, move on it. Either there's no option or you've already assessed your options.
All right, looks like Cello, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple of things that I've observed at Water District where I work. One is that it's a large organization and there's competition for projects, sort of. And there's a committee, and I think that it's about 4 months process to weed through all the sort of business cases. But it's really a sort of competition and advocacy, where different teams or groups are kind of pushing forward the things that they would like to see happen. And it's a large committee, and so it takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of time. The other thing that I think is a little bit unfortunate that after that, senior management takes a look at what the committee decided and they make changes. So something that was below the line, what we call below the line, it means it's not going to get funded, gets pushed up, and something that was up gets pushed down. And I think that that fact really sort of undermines or you know, people go through 4 months of dealing with this, and then you have a list, and then there are decisions that are not fully transparent when these priorities are changed. So I think that to keep the transparent, first of all, to keep the transparency out is kind of beneficial for sort of the integrity of the process. So that's just what I've observed.
All right, very good. Well, Jessica, you got some good feedback going. Anybody else?
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Anybody else got anything else to add on the BCE? Well, very good. Well, it sounds like you're making some progress, and you've identified something to tackle that sounds like it's going to be of value for your organization as you're moving forward. So that's great. That's great. Anybody else want to jump in with, and I kind of posed 3 questions. So, you know, if you've identified an improvement initiative that you want to share, maybe if you've already got something going, if you got any early wins in terms of progress you've made on a selected initiative. And then, you know, a couple weeks ago, Gitachi shared their project plan. If anybody's, you know, made some progress on that front, just to help organize your effort. All right,
I've got mine, but I'll pull it up when we're ready, Dan.
When you're ready, okay.
So it happens to include some recent progress, but I wanted to let's let others jump in first.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in? Well, I'll just share on our project delivery front. We're actually tackling what I would consider 2 different interrelated initiatives. We're trying to get our business models developed, and then also, as Scott kind of alluded to, implementing improvements to our CIP planning and business case evaluation process. And Scott's already been making, or our team with Scott in the lead has been making progress on that front. And then Zach and I have been focused on the project delivery front, and our goal there is really just to document in a business model our CIP delivery process. We've got a pretty good work breakdown structure for how projects are delivered in our project schedules, but we're wanting to take it a little further and actually put that into a business process model, basically a flow chart. Cello might cringe if I'm using that word. I hope I'm okay to say that, but it's maybe a high level flow chart using we're using Signavio as one of the business process modeling software. So that we've made some progress in the last couple of weeks to get that drafted, and then we're getting ready to sit down with some of our stakeholders and get some feedback on that. And really our goal is just to be able to use that as a communication tool and a training tool so that we can show people here are the steps in the process for project delivery. So I'll just share that as I'm excited. We've made some progress in the last couple of weeks getting some of that documented. Any questions about that before we jump to the next thing? Anybody else want to jump in with what they're working on before we? There we go, Zanetta.
Just real quick, I don't know, because this is my first time attending this meeting. Has Tracy shared with you, with Hazen, what we're going to be doing at MSD in regards to this?
I don't think so. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, real quick. We're getting ready to start an initiative with documenting our as-is for our project delivery. process. So we're starting after planning and that piece. So we'll be documenting our as is, doing and improvements, and we're starting with a small portion of our engineering staff, and then we'll expand it. And then, so we just had our kickoff meeting with the core group. We're identifying our stakeholders. So we're going to be doing a survey, collecting all of our artifacts and documenting our as is, and then doing our to be. So our goal is to, we've got an aggressive goal, because I always have one, but we'll hopefully will be, we say try to get through January, but we'll have it done by March, the goal, and then we'll start on our to be. So just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, very cool. So yeah, and that's great, Zanette. I also different utilities tackling it in different ways, seeing some of those to help kind of get things going. So that's great. That's good. All right, anybody else? All right, last call before we shift to Jeff. We'll give him some time to share his case study, and then we'll have time for questions as well. So that's great. It's just now 10 o'clock here, so we've got another half hour. So Jeff, the stage is yours.
Great. All right, let's see if I can put this up on screen here. I haven't been using Teams, so how to...
If you move the mouse around, there's the little thing, and there's a little arrow pointing into a square. There it is.
I think we got it there, yeah?
Yep.
This is something I've cobbled together that I'm just to kind of keep the conversation going. And I'm pulling it from 3 different pieces of material, so I apologize for it not being a little smoother. You do what you can with the time you got, right? So let's take, it's basically one case study, 2 case studies built together. First of all, what I wanted to emphasize as my first example is that the way we package business case results varies a whole lot by the audience that we're dealing with. The example I've got here is a set of numbers that we did for a potential hydropower project a few years ago. This is the form in which those numbers went to our board. So which was probably more detailed than they wanted, to be honest. But as you know, there were hundreds and thousands of calculations behind this. But the point I would like to make is that sometimes you're just trying to get down to the brass tacks of it. How much money do we need up front? And is this thing going to pay for itself? So this was the form that we decided to put that together. And what I often do is include an estimated payback, because our engineers love to think in terms of payback, even though no economist would ever recommend using that method. But my GMS for a payback just last week, you'll see it in a minute. So the information behind that is a little different when it went to the top level GM behind that. Before it went to the board, he wanted to know all the core assumptions that went into whether this was a solid business case. This was more detail than our board members needed to know. So things like, what's this thing about benefits ranging from 6 to 10? Well, that's the overtime. They're going to grow over time with growth in volume and the price. And so assumptions on the escalation of that contract, renewal of the contract. What's the assumptions behind the O&M costs, and why do you have a range for the O&M costs? Again, they're growing over time. So pieces like that. What's the basis of this capital cost estimate? He wanted to know all those pieces. When we met with him to go through all that detail, we also went through some sensitivity analysis, as you'll often do, and figured out what the most critical variable is, because that's the whole point of sensitivity analysis, is what should we worry about. In this case, it was the electricity sales price that was critical. Discount rate and capital costs were more insensitive. So all of that to say that the way we package these things up matters a whole lot. That's just one little thing I wanted to throw out there as an example that we did. And that project managed to stall and not move, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get back to it in 20 years. Hydropower projects are hard to move. So the one I wanted to talk about more is a 2-part project that we recently got a new stage of approval for, which is doing biogas upgrading at one of our wastewater treatment plants. We've got 5 plants in the area. Here's where they are. Big watersheds to the north. And right down there, that dotted line, that's I think they're going to build a new wall there, if I understand correctly. But they're busy on the one in the south end, so they haven't built that one yet. That's the border, so that's how close we are to the border. Just for reference, basically sits at the border. This is about a 40-minute drive down there, depending on traffic. The biogas cleanup project was a way to use excess digester gas that we generate at our plant beneficially. Right now, it's just getting flared, and by upgrading that to biomethane or renewable natural gas. The reason we were doing that, our liquid waste plan said, you get out there and use liquid waste as a resource. So an ideal we could start with. Of course, it didn't. It all comes down to show us the money, though, and this happened to be a good project in that respect. The process we had in mind at the time was to displace natural gas that our local natural gas company uses by taking that gas that I just described that's going to flare, the gas that's not being used for our internal plant processes, and sending it over to Fortis to displace this natural gas. Biogas and RNG are considered greenhouse gas neutral, so that's a good thing. When we did so, we assessed the 2 main technologies that could be used, water wash and pressure swing absorption, and decided on a water wash technology. The nice thing about it is it's innovative, but it's not bleeding edge. This isn't something that has never been tried or proven. At the same time, it's not exactly something that's very common in North America. So that's the water wash. I'm not going to go through the technologies, but just so you're aware, there were a couple of key technologies there. How decided, of course, was an important consideration, and needs fit. Who knew? When we did so, the key to this was, it started with discussions with our local natural gas utility. They have a big RNG program. They've been told, you need to get into the RNG market and start developing a customer base. That's been the pieces that made that happen were at the provincial level. So say the equivalent to state level. They said, we have climate change goals that we're going to put in place, that we'd like to see the natural gas pipelines in our province, in our state, deliver 15% of their product as renewable natural gas by 2030. So get on it, natural gas company. Say, oh, and by the provincial authority, any state authority has to be GHG neutral. They can do it by buying offsets. They can do it by reducing their emissions or switching fuels, but they need to do it. So that created a platform where they're offering premium for buying renewable natural gas, and that was crucial to us. We needed to make choices about whether they were going to build this upgrading facility or us. We decided that we would build it because we want to get into the business. We want to get our own staff up to speed and developing expertise at upgrading biogas into RNG, because we intend to do this at some of our other plants, and we're busy working on that now. So that was an early decision that needed to be made, that needs to be revisited at each plant. Is what's the exact structure? And that matters from a business case perspective, because if they were going to take on costs, then they were willing to do so, but they were going to offer us a lower price. So in part of your negotiation, you needed to figure that out. This project took forever. We first looked at it in 2010, and it's going to be ready to run in February next spring. So in a couple months, where it's going to be up and running. There were a lot of bumps along the way that I won't go into today. Mostly had to do with a partner project that collapsed. And so when we finally managed to get it moving alone in 2015, it still took us 5 years to deliver. And I don't know what that says about us, but the challenges along the way were that there are plenty of folks in our organization who said, this isn't, why are you doing this kind of a project? Should we be in this business at all? Does this make money? We still have plenty of people who say, we want to, climate change is an emergency, but can't we do it without spending any money? So, which is a nice thought. But those questions come up. So in this particular case, the interesting that our local natural gas company, Fortis, is paying a premium for that gas. That means that they want to own the greenhouse gas reductions and ownership of those is kind of a new legal field that needed to be figured out and explored. The business case for this one, it came out to, we're estimating it's about 11 million in capital costs. Of course, there's going to be operational costs. And we, at the original project contract price we signed for, we think it about pays for itself. So that's all good and well. It's on its way. The piece that we've added onto it, and this is something that just got approval last, it's basically getting its approval now. We got our first nod from the board last week, is to add on to this system by extracting heat from our from our plant systems and using that to displace additional biogas. I'll show you what that looks like. This is kind of the overview of what it is. We're looking to make more money. And this is an add-on project that leverage is on that one I just described to you. That old system, the one that's under construction now, has a cleanup system and a big bladder for storing the gas that we need to process. We bought a bladder that's bigger than we needed, and that became a perfect opportunity to springboard and find ways to get more gas through that system because it had excess capacity. So here's that old project I just described to you, under construction now. Digesters, and we extract heat off of our digesters for our own processes and send some of it over to Fortis. What we're doing with this new project is spending another $10 million on heat exchangers. They're going to grab heat from the plant effluent and use that to preheat the boilers that go to our digesters in such a form that we need less of the heat, the RNG, to be used for our own processes, and more can be sent through and sold to that company. The good news about this, and what makes it especially attractive, is that this project doesn't pay for itself. So we went back to Fortis and said, we need more money, and they're extremely keen. They are short. They have more people who will buy RNG than they have supply. So they said, tell us what you need. So I gave them a price, and we're negotiating as we speak. The price that they give us, though, is going to apply to both projects. So we're going to be able to get a break even on this initial project, and we're going to end up very revenue positive on the first project. So that's a nice position to be in. It's going to lead to a certain number of GHG reductions per year. We think we can apply this at our other plants. The thing that makes this interesting from a business case perspective, though, is that we're also going out looking for a grant. And this sometimes gets tricky, because what's the business case for something where you're negotiating on a price, you don't have a certain price, and you're looking for a grant, and you don't know which of those or both will come through. So I actually had to describe this to our board last week, and they said, does this make business sense? And I said, it depends. If we get the grant and we get a better price from Fortis, well, I didn't want to say this too loud because it's like, we'll make scads of money. And that's not something you want to say in public. It was a public meeting. So instead I had to tone that way down. The reality is, though, that when you have several moving pieces, the business case gets a little trickier to describe. But that's effectively what this amounted to, is that what makes it hard is we have a grant, we're renegotiating price, and the price will affect not only this project, but other projects. That happens when things get complex like that. My GM said, thanks for describing all that to me. I just want to describe it in payback. So he said, what's the capital cost if we get the grant? He said, it's 6. He said, okay, so the revenue is 400,000 on 6 million. That's a 15-year payback if you get the grant. Write that down. And that's what went out to our board. So engineers love payback. I don't think that was a very accurate description, but made him happy. And that's how we described the project. So we think it's going to move forward. Whether we get the grant or not, if we get an improved price, this project makes a lot of sense. And just to further complicate it, we're going to build it whether we get either one. I think we'll get both. So that's an example of a recent business case analysis that we did. I could pull up the entire business case. We did it in-house in this case. The first part we did in-house, the second part we sent out of house, and combined the two for the purpose of negotiations with our natural gas utility. So it's kind of an interesting example of some of the complexities of business case evaluation. Be of interest. I realize it's a fairly unique angle, the RNG one, But I think interest in RNG is growing, not only in Canada, but within North America. So I kind of rushed through that. I hope that was of some interest, and sorry for the brevity.
No, thank you, Jeff. That's great. Yeah, as I was thinking about it, just kind of illustrated the benefit of doing business case evaluations, with that type of project that you just shared, and the realities of getting down into the complexity of the costs and benefits and the realities of risk, and how to characterize and how to communicate that. So yeah, thank you. So we've got a little bit of time. Let's open it up for anybody that has questions about again, mainly the process and how Metro Vancouver is using business case evaluations, that kind of thing. Looks like Scott's asking, jumping in.
Oh, by the way, that house there, that'll cost you about $500,000 if you want that one. So actually, I have no idea what that house is. Sorry.
I was maybe a comment and a question
Yeah.
back to Jeff, but one of the things that I think we saw from Jeff was that they've created a role for Jeff where it's basically maybe a relatively independent role for evaluation of these kinds of things. And somebody else, I think Scott Parker or somebody else brought up earlier, that what you often have are basically status quo approaches, or you have, let's say, project managers that want to do what they consider to be their project. And so how do you, basically get independent views, an economic analysis type of view, as well as a steering team kind of, oversight to make sure that it's not just rubber stamping, capital project manager, projects in the process. So I don't know if you had, Jeff, that, what your experience in Metro Vancouver might be, or Dan, you're in the middle of all that. Others are, Kathleen, Getachew, others, but those seem to be some threshold questions.
That is a great question, Scott. Some of the key becomes the use of standardized methods and parameters, knowing that when we send out a study or a feasibility study, that we're using certain escalation rates that have been established and agreed upon, certain discount rates, prices, and so on. That helps a lot just for having consistency within the organization. When an answer comes back, that we know it's consistent with our organizational numbers and plans.
Yeah,
but you're right that it's still possible that there are folks who want to force something through. It does happen, and that helps. But if someone at the table has enough power and says, I don't care what the numbers came back as, I want to do this thing, it'll happen. And that's just people and politics, and that will always happen in life. You don't, you can override that.
Well, Scott, I thought Jeff, I thought your comment on the use of payback versus other metrics or other ways of looking at the benefits was kind of spoke to Scott's point that sometimes we, as an organization or as leaders, get stuck in a rut at looking at one way of looking at it. And within your role in this process, you've kind of open the door to discussion about, well, maybe we should be looking at these things in other ways to really characterize the benefits in order to make a good decision. So I thought that was kind of interesting to hear those comments from your perspective.
Yeah, that is an interesting debate. We definitely use net present value or net present worth most of the time. It's the best representation of the life cycle value of a project to the organization from a government perspective. I won't go to our board and use that language. I just describe it as this project will break even or over the project life. Because net present value doesn't mean anything to anybody, but that's the underlying mechanism we use and that we're trying to instill in all of our assessments.
See, Kathleen, did you want to jump in there? maybe Zanetta, she's got her hand
I
raised
think
too.
Zanetta had her hands up first.
Go ahead, Zanetta.
I just needed to lower mine. I apologize.
That's all right.
Oh, sorry about that.
Zanetta, you can raise your hand anytime you like.
We
You're
always
so
want to hear
kind.
from you.
That's
Oh,
right.
y'all are wonderful. Thank you.
So Jeff, a couple of things struck me. One thing we'll talk offline. The particular project is very interesting about using the heat to increase the gas that you're selling, but that's not for this conversation. But in terms of how you compare projects that you need to keep your, meet your permits, your regulatory obligations, your customer expectations versus projects that you do to generate revenue. Do you have the same criteria, or how do you compare business cases across that? Because we had in one of our earlier, not really the business case evaluation, but the project validations, innovation and financial, is it like 5% or 10%? It never can compete with something that you need to, fix the water mains in the street kind of thing.
That is an excellent point. And what I'm going to pull up is an example of that that came up. I apologize. This is actually from my course lecture that I'm giving right after we finish this meeting, which is on business case analysis. A few years ago, we went through an assessment of whether we were going to be violating the new federal regulations for our discharge in certain areas. I think this might have been total suspended solids, I forget. And they said, do we need to make a substantial new investment in treatment to ensure that we stay below the new federal limit? And that becomes a risk assessment. And we had no idea what to do, to be honest. Our engineers were going, what do? We know we've popped above the limit of 2 or 3 times the last few years. Are we going to be above it? Is this going to get worse or not? So what ends up happening is there are several factors. One is, the reality is we could violate our permit, take the fines, and move on, but we don't. We have a political climate where we say we never want to violate our certificate standards. Okay, so then it's a question of how much of a cushion do we want to put below that line. What you see here is what I did, which is I basically put a trend line on our past emissions, which had popped above the line occasionally, and then I mimicked that same set and duplicated it. Can you see this screen or no?
No, I just see the pretty lake with the $500,000 house.
Oh, I didn't switch it over. My apologies. Let me flip to I thought it would have replaced that screen with the same. My apologies. Let me see if I'll pop that up. When I switched it, I thought it would have switched. Let's put that up there. And I'll put this on. What we had was a pattern where we saw rising levels, rising trend of the concentration that we were getting over time, and we'd popped above the limit 2 or 3 times in the last few years. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so all I did was I took the pattern and I replicated it. You notice it looks exactly like it. That's because I mimicked it, because I don't have a Monte Carlo model. So I said, let's imagine that this same pattern were to repeat for the next decade, but I added on the trend line. And I said that in that case, we'll be above the line several more times. We'll violate our permit several more times. That told us, that was enough for them to say, we're worried. We're not willing to violate our permit at all. The fact that our probabilities have risen at all is enough that they decided to make a major investment. I don't know if you'd call that a business case, because it's a zero tolerance situation. It was basically it was a trigger. And they said, on the basis of this, we're going to trigger a major additional investment to make sure that we meet our norm. I think these are the most challenging kinds of problems, because it isn't a case where we're looking at marginal options. It's all in or nothing. And at least in this particular case, with a zero tolerance for risk. And do we always have a zero tolerance for risk is one question I think we need to face. Do we have options that would allow us to do a partial treatment as compared to a full treatment to ensure we stay below that, in this case, federal fisheries and Canadian standard limit? I think those are the interesting challenges that are different, as you noted.
All right, very good. Good questions. And Jeff, good presentation. And yeah, really gave us a lot in a brief amount of time here on a Monday morning. So I really appreciate that. So round of applause for Jeff. We got about 5 minutes left. I want to wrap up the call, make sure we get done on time. I know you guys probably have full calendars after this. So just as a way to wrap up, I feel like these sessions have been helpful. We're getting some good sharing going on. I guess let me know or just jump in if you have one right off the top of the head. If there's any topics in particular related to BCE or to project delivery that you'd like to hear from in the next couple of meetings, and we can see if we can get some volunteers from the audience to present. And so also that would be the second ask is there anybody out there that would like to share next meeting, spend like Jeff did, maybe 10, 15 minutes just sharing what you're working on and where you're at and how things are going. Kathleen has her hand raised. Wow.
So no, I'm not volunteering.
Oh.
We're not quite ready yet. We've got a November 6th deadline for people within our team to come back. So I think after that we'll have some good things to share. But and this would not require a lot of preparation, but I would be really interested from all the different utilities to hear the team composition on the BCEs. Who do they have on their teams? So maybe we can put that as an agenda, not so much as the presentation for one person to do, but I think as a bunch of people could add their input and why they have certain composition or if they've changed it or whatever. That's my
awesome
request.
Thank you.
And Dan, I would just add another possibility would be metrics, which we haven't really talked about lately, came up in the earlier phase, and Jason and others were working on that, but we heard about payback period, and we're dealing with both project delivery as well as BCEs. So that would be interesting to incorporate, hear back, or at least document as part of this process.
Yeah,
I've got another topic to throw on a future agenda, Dan. That would be how you handle escalation in costs. I say that because we're seeing a huge mountain of major works happening in our area that's causing it to be difficult for us to get tradespeople, and we're finding some of our quotes are coming in at double what we'd originally estimated. And how we handle that from a cost forecasting point of view has been really challenging. How to get getting good numbers at all on cost escalation is tricky, and forecasts even more so. So just as another group discussion item, I don't know if any of you faced that, but that would be really valuable for us.
Okay. One other topic that came to mind as Scott was talking is related to project delivery is folks that have maybe put together what I'll call project health dashboards. So basically, how are you tracking projects? How are you sharing that with leadership and others? We're working towards development of that. So that's kind of related to the metrics, but that'd be another really good topic. Right. Well, we've just got a few minutes left. Anybody that wants to jump in for next meeting that wants to present on any of those topics, or if you have another one in particular, just reach out to Cello or myself or Getachew, and we'll definitely be glad to get you on the agenda. And our next meeting will be 2 weeks from today, which will be in November. I can't believe that, November 9th. So we'll get an agenda out to everybody a couple days before. And Cello, go ahead and bring us home.
I just wanted to let you know that whoever is planning to work on business process modeling, we have Mike Barnett back in back online. He's happy to help. He's happy to review the models. He's help to help with the process itself. So if you know his email address, just contact him directly. If not, you can just ping me and I'll connect you. He'll also help with putting stuff in Signavio, whatever is related to business process modeling. So he is a resource that we can leverage, just to let you know.
All right, fantastic. So yeah, and we've talked to Mike, and yeah, he's a great resource. And of course, now with having access to people online, wow, you can get a lot of value just getting him on a Teams call and walking through things on the screen. So thank you, Cello.
Okay.
All right. Well, I've got 29 after, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. And thank you all. Got excellent participation in this group. Really appreciate everybody taking the time. So have a great week.